The Chainwheel Diaries podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Bartley Berlin. Copyright Brian Bartley Berlin, all rights reserved. Available on Apple and Spotify. Unless you've been living on another planet, you should know about Ryan Van Duzer, one of the most prolific bike travelers and bicycling advocates anywhere. He does not own a car and rides his bike everywhere, leading by example that we can get around without automobiles. He is famous for his mantra, no whammies, no flatties, and no crashies, and his slogan, get out there. His adventures are well documented, and you can be inspired by them by joining his Patreon channel, like I did, or following him on his YouTube channel. Links are provided in the show notes and on my YouTube channel. For this episode of Chainwheel Diaries, I didn't want to hear his stories about his bike adventures. I'm very familiar with them. But rather engage in a discussion about bicycling and politics. We kick around ideas about the empowerment of bicycling in a world dominated by cars. Hopefully our conversation will inspire you to advocate for bicycling, better bicycling infrastructure, and making the world a better place. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan. It's great to meet you.
Hey, I am psyched to be here, and it's Monday, and we're going to have fun.
We are going to have fun. Happy Monday, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
So normally this podcast would be bike travel stories, your latest adventure, what you experienced, all the road angels you came across. But today I'd like to go in a slightly different direction and talk about bicycling and politics. And the reason is, Ryan, a few years ago, I think it was during the 2020 election, you posted on social media, probably a progressive leaning comment. And one of the readers clapped back by writing that you should stay in your lane. Like saying, oh, great, another liberal bicycler. What is it about people who ride bikes are liberals, Democrats, tree huggers, socialists? What's up with that?
Well, we're definitely tree huggers, right? Because we like being out in nature. We like pristine, clean environments. And to go back to your, that comment, you did some research, and that's not the only time people have told me to stay in my lane. But, I look at my channel and my outlet as a way to talk about things that are important to me, that don't always revolve around the world of cycling, but might revolve around the world of just treating our environment with care, treating other humans with care and dignity and respect and justice. And I am not just a bike rider. That's not the only thing I do, right? I'm a human. I care about my community. I care about my country. I want us to just get better and better. I want us to evolve, right? And so, yeah, sometimes I talk about things that aren't directly related to cycling because I don't want to, at the end of my life, look back and say, you know what? I didn't speak up about that because I was worried about losing followers. I want to talk about things that are important to me and hopefully spark conversation with my viewers. So as far as staying in my lane, I feel like my lane is humanity and the planet and all those things that make life so wonderful.
I ran across a book by Peter Cox, C-O-X, and it's about, what's it called? Let me pull it up here real quick. It's called Cycling Activism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the intersection of cycling and the social activism part of that and where those intersect. In my life, We're both on the same side of the ideological divide. In my life, cycling is not only freedom, but it is transportation, but it's also a way of making a statement that I don't always need to be driving a car. I don't need to be a motorist. I can have an identity as a bicycler, and that's okay, because we share a lot of those values of let's make the world a better place. But some of the interesting takeaways from that book is that he says, and he did a lot of research, but he says activism related to cycling isn't just about riding bikes, it's about advocating for change. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people forget. I think just riding a bicycle is, in a way, a political act. We're deciding to not drive our car, to, use less gas or whatever the reason is. And we're going to ride our bikes. So I think bikes are a great way to show our care for the world, our care for the environment. As you mentioned, transportation. There are a lot of people in our country on this planet who don't have access to a vehicle, and a bicycle is a much cheaper option to get around, to go to work, to take your kids to school, whatever it is. And so I'm a firm believer that the bicycle and the act of riding a bike is kind of the silver bullet to solving a lot of our planet's problems in a way. You think about the environment, you think about health and wellness, you think about just when you're riding a bike, you're kind of happy and jolly, and you're interacting with your community, you're waving at your neighbors, you're more part of where you live. Whereas when you're in a car, you're enclosed. You might be listening to music or a podcast, and you're in your own little bubble, which is fine. But I think when you're on a bike, you're saying, "Hey world, here I am. I'm pedaling, I'm not using gas, and I can stop and say hi to my neighbors and be part of the community."
The bicycling community is very strong, even though um, I'm not a road cyclist. I don't lacquer on Lycra and ride a 17-ounce bicycle. I've got a 2010 Surly long haul trucker, and it gets me around just fine. But I'm not super fast. I'm in no hurry. I'm really there to enjoy the ride. But despite that, I find that we're all after the same thing. We're all into bicycling. So even those road cyclists that pass me like I'm standing still, when we're all around and we're just shooting the breeze, we all are talking about the same thing, our love of riding a bike.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the cycling community itself can be ideologically neutral when it comes to just talking about biking.
Yep. And I guess the politics of biking might come in a city like Boulder, which is one of the friendliest places to ride a bike. We have over 350 miles of bike lanes, protected bike paths, and it's a safe place to ride a bike. Those don't just happen out of nowhere. It's not like city council comes up with all these ideas. It's us, people in the community, who are saying, "Hey, this street is dangerous for riding a bike. I want to take my kids to school. Let's propose something so that we can widen the street or make a protected bike lane or even a bike path." And that's, I guess, where politics gets involved with cycling. It's because we want to make our communities better for not only cycling, but people who are walking and people who aren't just driving cars.
You bring up an interesting point about infrastructure, and it's almost like which came first, the cyclist or the infrastructure. And I think that's one of the debates that we're currently having. As Peter Cox writes, as bicycle infrastructure expands across the country, local residents and politicians engage in heated debates. If you've ever been to a city council meeting where new bike infrastructure is being discussed, you can clearly see the divide between the people who want to use it and the people who don't want it built.
Yeah.
Generally, it means, in many cases, taking away a lane from automobiles and devoting that back to a protected or striped bike lane.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets really heated at that point in time. I live in the LA area. There have been numerous debates about bike lanes because motorists now are down from 2 lanes to one to accommodate cyclists, and they're pissed off about it.
Yeah, and we've even had that in Boulder, which is a very progressive bike friendly city where we've taken some roads, some major north south thoroughfares, and put up protected bike lane, which squeezes the road, which reduces speed limits, which I think is a good thing. And people freak out. And, they go to city council and they'll say, I never see bikes in the bike lane anyway. Why are we doing this? We're only catering to a small amount of people. And we've seen examples all over the world, especially in Paris, where they have taken out a lot of the drivable roads in downtown Paris and made them into bike lanes and bike paths only. And bike ridership has skyrocketed. And a lot of the research shows that if you build it, they will start riding there. Families will start taking their kids because they feel safe. And another point, what the main reason why people don't want to ride their bikes is because they don't feel safe. And so if we can make them feel safe, they're going to ride their bikes more. And luckily when I was a young boy, I fell in love with bicycles. I was raised by a single mom with 4 kids. I knew that I wasn't going to get a car when I turned 16 and that I was going to be riding my bike everywhere. And I loved it. And so I think where we're going now is a really good place because I think younger people are getting more excited about riding bikes and alternative transportation in general. And hopefully that trend spreads as they get older. I mean, I've heard trends and stats that young people are not getting driver's license because they don't want to drive, which I think is cool.
I think that's very cool. I hope that's a long-term trend. So you bring up a point about building the infrastructure first, and riders will come. Safety is the key concern because I think there is tremendous interest in people wanting to take up bicycling, maybe even riding bike to work. In LA, that's a little challenging.
Yeah.
But if you look at stats around the country as far as cities with the highest percentage of bicycle commuters, Boulder is in there. Portland, Oregon, 6%. Interesting. San Francisco, that was not one that I had considered, but they have the density to make that happen. Seattle's in there. Philadelphia's down at the bottom, but they are trying to build out some bike infrastructure. I think it's more than just painting lanes. I think it's really about building networks so that people can get from one place to another. What's been your experience with that?
Absolutely. Painting lanes has proven to not really help at all. It doesn't make the cyclist safer. A car is not going to pay attention to a little green box or whatever. It seemed like a good idea, 10 or 15 years ago, but the only way is these protected bike lanes where a car physically cannot get into the bike lane. So if you're in the bike lane, you're like in your little protected force field. And that's the only way to make a mom with a cargo bike taking 3 kids to school, make them feel safe, right? Or anybody. Like my mom doesn't like riding her bike a lot because she doesn't feel safe. So we've found some safe ways for her to take a bike path the whole way to get to the YMCA for her fitness class or whatever it is. And so in Boulder and beyond, not only do I like big adventures, and that's what my YouTube channel is about, but I've always been a bicycle advocate. I want to see more people riding bikes more often. I'm not saying cars are horrible. My mom was a single mom. She obviously had to drive us around to soccer practice and all that stuff growing up. But I definitely think as a society, we can use our cars a lot less. And that will just benefit our communities in every single way. Less noise pollution, less air pollution, more connected neighbors. There's been lots of research about the Beltline in Atlanta and how all these wonderful businesses has built up around it. And it's created this wonderful community.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Beltline in Atlanta. Our daughter lives there. I'd like to ride it someday. The spirit of cycling and wanting to make the world a better place still rubs a lot of people on the other side the wrong way. And it's the climate change deniers generally, and just basically on the ideological right. that giving up my car is you're not going to take my guns and you're not going to take my car.
Yeah.
And cyclists are annoying because sometimes I have to share the road with them, and that really, gets me going. So there's a lot of anger on the motorist side and unwillingness to give up, their automobiles. And I don't know how we're going to change those minds.
It's tricky, and it's an extreme sense of entitlement where I get to have my truck or whatever it is and drive it wherever I want and never get slowed down by a bicycle. Roads are only for cars. Why are these annoying liberals on bikes in my way? And even in Boulder, you probably know what coal rolling is. That happens here. And I think people roll into Boulder and they're like, I am going to blast all these Boulder bikers with a bunch of exhaust from my big truck. And it's happened to me very close to my house. And it's their statement to tell us, hey, you know what? Climate change is fake. And I'm going to show you that I can do this all day long and nothing's going to change and our planet's going to be fine, which is
Oh,
obviously not true.
obviously not true. Yes. So our state agency is Caltrans, and Caltrans is supposed to be incorporating pedestrian and bike lanes into any new roads that are being proposed for construction. That hasn't really happened. Part of the problem is Caltrans was developed to build freeways, and cycling really just didn't compute with that. So the plan has always been, and it's failed miserably, but add another lane. So we're always adding lanes to our freeways, and those lanes immediately fill up with more cars. So that's not solving the problem. The problem is we need to get cars off the road.
Yep.
But again, motorists aren't too happy about that. And where does that rage come from? So I ran across an article on the BBC. Why is that rage directed at cyclists? Well, one of the things that comes out is cyclists don't pay for those roads. People who pump gas pay for those roads. So there's that entitlement that you talked about.
Which is a funny statement because, of course, we pay for those roads. We
Yeah.
pay for taxes in other ways. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But it
Anyway.
is one of those. Yeah, it's the moral factor. As a motorist, I am morally granted the opportunity to drive on this road. You as a cyclist don't have that because you haven't made a contribution like I have. So there's that entitlement, which is very, very strong and really hard to cut through. I've been honked at. I've gotten the one finger salute. I've had, like you say, I've had people gun their Ford F-150s as they pass me to, just give me a little bit of a wobble. So I understand that there's a little bit of rage directed at cyclists. I don't completely understand it. It seems counterintuitive, but that's part of the divide that we have to cross.
Not only counterintuitive, but a lot of these interactions are killing cyclists or injuring cyclists. You've heard about the guy in Texas in a truck that purposely ran over like 6 people during a bike event. And this is happening. So, when you use your car as a weapon, and that's really what they are a lot of times, that's where, it's like, okay, you're frustrated by us riding on the road with you. So you want to murder us by swerving into us? That doesn't sound very, nice to me.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate, but 77-year-old cyclist in LA was killed riding his bike in Griffith Park. And that's one of my favorite rides. It's a great place to ride a bike. It was on a main thoroughfare. Motorist was in a hurry, sideswipe. He died as a result of that car versus bicyclist. The good news is that they have now closed that road to car traffic. So you can't drive on that road anymore. So that's very much in support of cyclists. But it took a death to close that road to car traffic. I hope that's not what it takes to continue to build more infrastructure and take car lanes away in order to devote them to cycling, but sometimes, unfortunately, that seems to be the case.
Yeah, I hate to hear that it took the death of a wonderful human to inspire this change, which is great. I'm glad to hear that. But most times when a driver hits a cyclist and kills them, they barely get a slap on the wrist. And that really is the problem. So there's a lot of cyclist lawyers all over the country now who are popping up to defend cyclist rights. And I really appreciate them advocating for us because they're using their cars as a weapon, whether they mean to or not. When you get into a car, you have a responsibility to drive responsibly. And a lot of people don't. And they're, with distracted driving now and cell phones, it is rampant. More and more cyclists and pedestrians are being killed every year because of people not paying attention to the road while they're going 45 miles an hour down a city street.
Yeah, and you said earlier, not only advocating for safer lanes and pathways for pedestrians and cyclists, but lowering speed limits.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to see a little bit of that. But again, citizens have to advocate for that because it won't happen on its own
Mm-hmm.
unless deaths occur because of speed limits. If those deaths are attributed to the speed limits being too high, then a change may happen. Otherwise, citizens have to, torches and pitchforks, they have to come to these planning commission meetings and city commission meetings and advocate for slower uh, speed limits. And I think that would have a big impact as well.
Absolutely. Boulder recently started a campaign called 20 is Plenty, 20 miles per hour on all the city, neighborhood roads. And it's funny, it got a lot of pushback. And it's like cars wanted to go faster. And it's like, really? You really need to go a little bit faster to get to wherever you're going a little bit quicker? I don't know. I don't understand it. But we're living in a world now where we're realizing the benefits of cycling and alternative transportation for so many different reasons. Like I said earlier, pollution, health and wellness, just more connected communities. And we see examples in Europe who have been living this lifestyle for a long time. I lived in Sweden when I was 18 as an exchange student. And I'm coming from Boulder, which is a pretty bike friendly place. And then Sweden blew my mind with how bike friendly they are. And then I would go across the water to Denmark, Copenhagen, which is like on Amsterdam's level as far as like everybody rides a bike there. And they have put in a lot of effort to create safe bike lanes. So you're more likely to get hit by a bike in Copenhagen than a car. And
Yes.
that's what we need. And I think it's slowly making its way over here. And I think a lot of it has to do with, advocates raising their voices, but also storytelling. There's a lot of YouTube channels now that specifically talk about this, not just bikes or active towns, whatever these channels are. And they're highlighting the wonderful things that are happening and inspiring us over here to say, you know what, we can make those changes too. I want my community to be a safer place for families and kids to ride their bikes around.
US definitely lags behind other countries as far as bike infrastructure, but the Netherlands wasn't always like that.
True.
They have been developing this over decades to the point where they're probably now predominantly bicyclers commuting to work, commuting to the park, taking kids to school, and so forth. But it wasn't always like that. In 2008, I visited Berlin, and they have a wonderful bike infrastructure. And we saw dozens and dozens of people riding to work. Um, in LA, the commute to work is going to be a little bit tricky. It's definitely going to take some protected lanes, and those lanes have to go somewhere. They have to begin somewhere and they have to end somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the lesson that we should take away from Europe is it didn't happen overnight,
Mm-hmm.
but steadily over a number of years, and we can do that. If it doesn't look like we want to, okay, tomorrow we want 500 miles of protected bike lanes, probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. But if we say, okay, this route is traveled by a lot of cyclists who are trying to get to a job, and there's a painted lane for only about a third of it. All we have to do is extend that, make it a little wider, and we'll see more cyclists on that, and they won't be driving their cars to their jobs, and there's probably no place to park anyway. But I think that, incrementally we can make a difference.
Absolutely. And it's a mindset change as well, which leads to a culture change. When I lived in Sweden, all the young people see their parents riding their bikes to the grocery stores, riding their bikes to work, putting their bike on the train and commuting to the next town over. So they grow up having that normalized so that when they have a bike when they're a little bit older, they ride it to school and ride it to work. I always remember remarking in Sweden that, high school parties, like almost all of the people going would ride their bikes to the parties, and the girls would get all dolled up and looking all pretty and makeup and ride their bikes to a party, which would never happen in the United States, almost never, maybe a little bit in Boulder. But I was like, wow, this is a totally different world, and I love it. And so I think it's really going to just take, a mindset culture change where people are like, okay, this is how the world works. We're just going to ride our bikes now, as long as there's infrastructure to go along with it to make them feel safe.
Advocacy is really important to me, and I know it is for you as well. So I belong to the South Bay Bicycle Coalition, also the California Bicycle Coalition, also known as CalBike. CalBike advocates at the state level in Sacramento, and they lobby hard, and they chiefly go after Caltrans. Now, I say go after Caltrans. They're trying to partner with Caltrans. They're trying to help Caltrans see the future doesn't involve massive freeway lane expansion, but it really means safe streets for everybody, motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And I really count on these organizations to do the right thing. I give money to them in order to help their cause. I urge people and other people that I ride with to support them. The League of American Bicyclists is another organization. So I think that if cyclists want to take some ownership of this, they should become advocates as well.
Absolutely. We can complain about it all day long, but unless we're doing something about it, our complaints just fly away into the wind and they get caught up in the exhaust smoke of somebody's Ford F-150.
That's right.
Talking about this is sparking so many things in my brain right now, where it's bike infrastructure, but it's also how our cities and towns are built. And this is going to take a long time. We don't really live in bike friendly, pedestrian friendly cities. The United States was built on the freeway system where you get in your car and you drive 30 miles to Costco. In Sweden, where I lived, you could ride your bike a few blocks and there's a little grocery store and a little bakery and everything you'd need. You don't need to travel long distances to get somewhere. Like in LA, you probably have to move really far to go do anything, to go to the movies. And so I think our towns also need to start being built around livable towns, livable cities.
Yeah, that's a sea change, Ryan,
Mhm.
of city planning. But I know that there is a lot of people who favor that as neighborhoods develop, rather than making it more accessible by car, making it more accessible by pedestrians and cyclists. Um, that'll take a while,
Yeah.
but if there's a major design on the horizon, consider the people who might want to just walk up to the hardware store, the market, the local theater,
Mhm.
any of the local businesses, and the local businesses will thrive and everybody will win. It's a utopian version in a certain way, but it's doable. There's some hope for that.
There definitely is. You look at Minneapolis, Portland, Davis, California, Tucson, even, they've built a lot of bike infrastructure. And along these bike paths, breweries pop up and, where you can take the whole family and the kids can go play. And there's playgrounds and there's pocket parks. Everything you need is, pops up around these bike paths, which is also good for the local economy.
All
Money
right.
talks.
Money talks. It will happen. So while we're advocating for getting better bike infrastructure, let's also advocate for getting more people on bikes.
Yes.
You've partnered with Priority Bicycles on a fundraiser for kids.
Hmm.
Rally Up, I believe, is the name
Yep.
of it. Tell us about that.
So this is actually the fourth time doing this fundraiser. We've raised over $160,000 in the last few years, and we donate the money to organizations and nonprofits who are committed to getting young people on bikes and young people who wouldn't otherwise have the economic means to buy a bicycle. When I was young, times were tough, and so I can kind of relate to not having a bicycle. And so it's really important for me to get these communities of kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to have a bike to get them a bicycle. And so that's really important to me. I've dedicated a lot of my life to working with young people. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras, working in youth development. I've worked in orphanages in Dominican Republic, in Mexico, and other places. And I truly believe we got to start this early. We've got to start this when people are young. So if you get a bike when you're a kid, you think back to some of your best childhood memories, you feel the freedom in your hair, and you ride your bike and you just feel like, you can go past the confines of your little neighborhood and it just feels great. You're exploring. It's the sense of freedom. And if we can give young people that feeling now, I hope that a large portion of those people will continue cycling throughout their lives and become bicycle advocates and fight for a better, network of bike-friendly places in the United States and
Well,
beyond.
that's great, Ryan. Not only is it liberating, but it should be normal. It should
Yeah.
feel normal. Just
Yeah.
riding your bike. You never give another thought to, Mom, can you run me to the store? You hop
Mhm.
on your bike. You've got freedom. You've got independence. It should just seem normal.
And it's funny you say that because I've never had a car in my life. I've ridden my bike everywhere. And when I tell people that, they think I'm crazy. They think I'm not normal. Like, oh, wow, he must have a lot of DUIs or something. Like, why would he ride his bike everywhere? And this is even in Boulder, and it's just, we need to normalize this type of lifestyle. I know of a few families in Boulder where they get around everywhere on bikes and they have the bike trailers for the little kids and they don't have a car. So it's definitely possible in a city like Boulder. I understand that most cities in the United States are not as bike friendly, but here we go. It's possible.
All right. In closing, let's kind of summarize a little bit. So we started off, hey, bicyclers are liberals, tree huggers, they want to change the world. They want cars off the road. Guilty, all true. Um, but we also want to reach out to the other side because I have friends who are conservatives
Mhm.
and see cycling as it's a cost saver. So I prefer not to pay $5 a gallon, almost $6 in LA. I would rather ride my bike to work and it's 20 miles each way, but I would rather do that than spend the money on gasoline. So yeah, there's an attitude where I see the cost savings associated with not driving my car, not paying an exorbitant amount for gas, but it kind of stops there. And I would like to help get them the rest of the way that you don't have to give up your right leaning politics to embrace bicycling as a way to change the world in a very positive way that doesn't make you look like a squishy liberal. It just makes you look like a really smart, normal person.
Yeah, I am with you 100% on that. And I think the best way to do it, at least in my life, when I try to um, inspire people in any way, shape, or form, whatever I think is important, leading by example is the way. And so if we can lead by example, and maybe we have some conservative friends or friends who just are scared of riding their bikes in general, and we show them, hey, we can do this. It's not that big of a deal. We learn a little bit about bike maintenance, so we're not scared of the bike. If we get a flat tire, we can show them the safe ways to get around town and show them how fun it is, even on a cold morning. When you get up and you ride your bike, you are guaranteed to have a smile on your face. It feels good to ride your bike no matter what. You're breathing fresh air. You're hearing the birds chirping above you. Maybe you see a sunrise or a sunset. Like those are all very good things that have direct benefits to our health. If we can show people that, and that's what I do on my channel, I think we can get more people out there riding their bikes.
Well, let's do it, Ryan. It's been a great pleasure talking to you about everything but bike travel, because these are important issues. I mean, literally, we're burning the planet to the ground, and um, there's just a real resistance to taking positive action in a small way, riding a bicycle to work, riding a bicycle on errands as a way to cut those emissions and make the world a better place. And we both definitely feel strongly about that. So hopefully this will help get the word out some more.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Usually podcasts want to talk about all my gnarly adventure stories, which is fine. But this is really the heart and soul of why I like riding bikes. I am a bicycle advocate at heart, and I want more people to ride their bikes.
Well said. Thanks, Ryan. Great to meet you.
Cheers.